Hello, people of the world. How are you? I am late to this week's astrological update, so thank you for your patience. If you might be able to tell, my voice is very hoarse. I had a very big weekend. I was talking much more than I normally do. And I did the astrology event in New York City, where I actually was able to meet and talk to around 10 people about Saturn and Neptune in their charts. And it was one of the most incredible things ever. Super low key, super casual, but very exciting. So thank you if you came to that. But I was projecting my voice and talking astrology to literal other human beings, again, in a way that I never have. And so things are changing, okay? There's only one day this week I am particularly interested in, and that's Thursday, February 26th. So I'm going to pull up the chart and show you. Probably at the end of this video, I will look at the rest of the week just to make sure I haven't overlooked anything. But that is what I'm feeling called to do right now. So let's go into it. I shall share my screen. Here we have Thursday, February 26th of 2026. I have casted the chart for the final minute and the final hour so we can see what has been going on for that entire day. But do keep in mind, this is Eastern Standard Time as I am located in that time zone. So do adjust if you need to based on where you are. There are three reasons that the astrology of Thursday is interesting, notable, noteworthy, exciting for me, and kind of is directing a lot of the energy as we build up to it in the week and also as we come down to it. This is also the final week of February, so we start March next week, and it's also the final week before we have a lunar eclipse, a full moon in the sign of Virgo. Okay, so this is also a week where we are in the midst of eclipse season, highly charged, we also had a blizzard in New York where I am. And so there's there's just a lot moving, shaking in the world, mostly within ourselves, though, because I truly still am of this positioning that nothing actually really can push us or affect us. It is truly our goal, our prerogative. The only work that we must do in the world is to keep our hearts calm, to recognize the truth in every single moment and to be present, and not in just a spiritual way. I say that, to be present, but what I mean is the present moment is the only way you can actually affect change. When you can allow yourself to see reality clearly for what it is and accept it, that's when you are able to see things change out of your own free will. Okay? So the reason that's a big deal, and this is not one of the three things I just mentioned for Thursday, but the reason everything I'm saying is a big deal is because we are brand new, just about a few days into a 36-year-long cycle that has just restarted. As of February 20th, we have Saturn and Neptune in a new phase to each other, which started at 0 degrees of Aries. You've probably heard all about this if you follow anything in astrology, but essentially the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is about how you make your dreams reality, how you have been doing that over the last 36 years, as well as how the collective creates reality around dream or around illusion, how illusion can mask reality. And so we've seen as the conjunction completed itself, completed the last 36 cycle, which would have been before February 20th, that cycle was completing. So we saw a lot of illusions face reality, right? And what's happening now is we get to rebuild. We get to move with our instinct, move with our first breath. This new phase of this cycle is all about the exploration, okay? It's about having random experiences. Any new phase conjunction in the transit or in a birth chart is about initiating evolutionary experiences, okay? It's not about judging them. It's not about being too intellectual or having to figure out which one you're going to do. There's no figuring out in this phase. There is only action. And once you put your hand on a stove, you're going to realize you don't want to do that anymore. And so it won't be a matter of weighing out your moral values, if this is going to be the decision or that's going to be the decision. There will be a knowing, all right? That new phase conjunction is an Aries archetype, right? Even more, this conjunction has happened in the sign of Aries. So your free will, your fire, your impulse, and not curbing your impulse is of the utmost importance right now, all right? With that said, Mars, the ruler, is in Aquarius, and it is on this day that I am pointing to, Thursday, going to be making an exact square to Uranus. And in fact, the square itself will perfect on Friday, but we will be feeling this from Thursday into Friday, I believe. So yeah, we can see it, it will pass by Friday. But I'm going to go back to Thursday. We're going to be feeling that square already on Thursday because it's usually the lead up to the exact aspect that we are going to feel the most effects in our lives. And so, what effects might we feel with a Mars Uranus square? So, as I said, Mars right now is the ruler of the Saturn Neptune new phase conjunction, which means that what Mars is doing is ultimately what is motivating whatever new dreams we are trying to build out right now. So, what is Mars doing? Mars itself is in the sign of Aquarius right now. Mars itself is about action. It's about the immediate impulse. All right? Evolutionary astrology teaching, Mars is the lower octave of Pluto. Pluto is the most important planet in evolutionary astrology. Pluto is the root ball, as my teacher Ari would say. Pluto is the deepest reason that you exist, largely unconscious. It is your soul. It is the soul that we track as the thing that reincarnates, carries a core desire which wants to be seen through in this lifetime. There's a process of exhaustion that happens when you meet your desire. Okay? Pluto doesn't care whether you're having a good time or a bad time. Pluto just wants you to have the time. All right, so the reason I bring that up is because Mars is the first place where we see Pluto's desires actualized in the life, right? Because Pluto itself is deeply invisible, unconscious, right? We can't see it without a telescope. We can't see it without some psychological reflection, without some, meta interrogation. But what we can see is Mars. Mars is everything we do. Mars is every move we make, okay? And with it being in Aquarius right now, every move we make is coming from the edge of our own intelligence, which is Aquarius, all right? The edge of our own intelligence, which ripples out as we live a life. It ripples out and manifests as the groups of people that we hang around, all right? The ideas that form the network of our own mind, of our own interest, the thing that keeps us researching our interest from that impulsive, instinctual sense, not from the sense of, oh, I must figure this out, but from the sense of, oh, it's my core reason in life to follow this thread. And really what's happening in any Aquarius signature is that we are bringing an infinite space that's kind of, I always picture it as just above our heads. We're bringing it down into linear time because Aquarius and Uranus are all about non-linearity. It's the Akashic records, for example, if you'd like. It's the individuated unconsciousness, which means it is everything us as individuals has ever done, ever could do, ever might do, will never do across every lifetime, across every potentiality. And it exists right above us in the realm of what's coming, what's our interest, and what feels like it's at the edge. And of course, this is where we get the connection to technology and scientific advancements, right? We perceive linearity in this way because technology seems to only grow over time. But what's happening is the growth in technology is also reflecting the growth of our own consciousness, because as we expand who we know ourselves to be, what it means to be a human, what we know our mind to be even, and this is, I love Rupert Sheldrake's idea of the mind and not the brain. Your brain is not your mind. Your mind is everywhere. I tend to believe this. Your brain is not your mind, which is to say your brain is part of your mind, but your mind is the whole world, the whole slew of consciousness. And that means you can go somewhere and have access to information just purely by being there in a way that your mind might not even know. So this Aquarius emphasis is so important and so strong, and I'm belaboring it because this is what is motivating our rebuilding of dreams right now. Okay? It's happening all week, but I'm emphasizing it right now because there's likely a new technology, a new group, an idea that you have been asserting yourself into with this Mars thing. You have been taking action in a group, in a new society, or pre-existing. And what's happening is not only are those actions ruling the new dream that you're building, right? So let's say you want to build, you want to build a house. That's your dream. Who's gonna be in your house? Well, this Mars in Aquarius is having you go take action to go meet people, go be in new groups, go explore the possibilities of who's going to be in your house later, okay? Just an example. But we'll see what's happening is on this day, Thursday and into Friday, Mars is making a last quarter square to its own ruler, Uranus in Taurus. Okay, this is what's called a last quarter square. And we've had many, many planets pass through where Mars is over the last few weeks. In fact, all of these planets have gone through and made a square to Uranus. So what does that mean? Mars is actually the last planet that's going to make that square to Uranus. And so we are really finishing out a big change that's already been underway for a few weeks now. Last quarter square is itself an Aquarian archetype. Okay? This is a 270-degree aspect between Mars and Uranus, calculated that way because Mars moves faster than Uranus. So Mars has moved 270 degrees away from Uranus. All right? Which means it is 270 degrees into a 360-degree cycle. And that phasal relationship is the basis of astrological interpretation as I do it. Because there's a very big difference between a 90-degree square, which is the first quarter square, and a 270-degree square, which is the last quarter square. At the last quarter square, Mars is almost finished with its journey, almost finished with that cycle of its relationship to Uranus. And so what happens at this square is you realize you have to let go of something. You have to liberate from everything that you have been working to manifest in this cycle. And that's because at this point, you've become very used to it. And suddenly it's not new anymore. And suddenly you have to realize it starts to make space for something else. All right. And we have already been initiated into that with the Sun squared, Mercury squared, Venus squared it already. Okay. We had a new moon solar eclipse that was exactly square Uranus, actually. And so we are very deep into this change, making space for what's new. Okay? But this is going to be the real kicker this week because Mars is where we meet that change with action. Okay? We meet that change with even more decisive action. There's something happening this week that we will take action on ourselves. This is how I am reading it, to create even more space, to really solidify the edges of the space that we have already made through our own will, through our own action, likely within a group or within some intellectual pursuit that we are making. All right? That's just kind of how it is. Now, I'm not going to belabor Uranus in Taurus here, but I will say this impulse of the group that you are in and the changes that's being made in this group have everything to do with how you value yourself and how you value your own intelligence with Uranus in Taurus. Okay? If you want me to say more about that at a later point, let me know. Uranus is very close to being completely finished with Taurus. And so that's a much larger theme. I'll probably talk about that later, but recognize this is about your values, how you value your participation basically in a group is changing. Okay. So, what are the two other things? Because this Mars Uranus square is going to be a big push, a big catalyst, but it doesn't mean you need to totally upend your life. It means you need to make some space in your brain. You need to make some space in your mind. You need to make some space in how you perceive the world because that's Aquarius ultimately. You might see yourself shifting in groups, shifting socially, but what that's reflecting on an internal level is that your mind is changing. The way that you perceive reality is changing. You're zoomed back a little bit, okay? That's what I see, all right? So, two other big things happening. So, first, and in fact, these two are, I'm linking them together, and that's Mercury stationing retrograde. All right. I love Mercury retrograde. I think it's normal. There's nothing wrong with Mercury retrograde. It's a great time to do every other thing you've wanted to do. However, and Mercury moving retrograde means that it is not moving at all. When a planet moves retrograde, it changes directions. And in order to change directions, it needs to slow down almost to a halt and then move the other direction. It doesn't just automatically move the other way. Okay, truly the planet is not actually moving backward. It's, again, our perception of the planet from where we are on Earth. That's how retrogrades work. And here's the thing. Mercury in Pisces itself is already an incredibly nonlinear signature. It's incredibly poetic. Mercury in Pisces can weave some interesting rationality out of a limitless abyss of imagination. And so Mercury moving retrograde in Pisces, it fundamentally to me is a synthesis, is an archetype that will be very creatively empowering, I think. But the reason I'm attaching it to this other thing that's happening is because this is not a normal Mercury retrograde in one very particular sense. And that's because this Mercury retrograde is completely tied to the north node of the moon, okay, for at least two reasons. And the first reason has everything to do with today, this day, February 26th. That's because Mercury is stationing retrograde on the same day as the sun is making a conjunction to the north node, also in Pisces. All right. The second reason is that Mercury itself entered its pre-retrograde shadow period while it was conjunct the north node in Pisces. To me, it means that this is a directionally significant Mercury retrograde in terms of the path that we feel is most quote unquote fated for us to take in our lives when it comes to how we hold on to our faith, or not hold on, right? How we allow ourselves to be led by faith. And with the sun on the north node on this day, we are seeing it in the light of day, the path being cleared. This is also the time in eclipse season where we are going to have some clarity on what the direction is, because the north node is what makes this eclipse season happen, or rather the nodal axis is what makes any eclipse season happen. So the closer the planets get to the nodes, the more we're seeing the nodal experience. Okay, so the last new moon was at the north node, but it was, several degrees away from the north node. So since then, we've been having the sun move closer and closer to the north node. And on this day, we have that sun with the north node as Mercury moves retrograde. So again, another fundamental thing about retrogrades is that it is an internalizing process. There is an internal review happening, whether that's happening only within yourself or it's a review of, again, the folks and the things happening outside of you. It is ruled by Neptune in Aries in its new phase conjunction to Saturn. So there is something about how our faith is guiding this new structural reality that we are building. And the whole point of this kind of being a thing on Thursday, now that I'm seeing it again more clearly, has everything to do with this moon that will be in the sign of Cancer on this day. In a first quarter trine to the sun, which is a lovely cycle within this lunar phase, a lovely opportunity within this lunar phase, rather, to really make the intention socially visible. Make whatever the intention was at the new moon, whatever was happening, whatever was beginning, there is a social visibility that's happening within this on this day on the 26th. And it has everything to do with your own emotional internal state and the expansion that is happening in your home because Jupiter is that expansive function. Jupiter itself is also slowing down and so getting a little bit more stable there. But I see this as an incredibly interesting day because we have a ton of directional, I won't say clarity, but understanding. We have a ton of directional understanding that what we also need to do is to take action to make more space for ourselves and be emotionally coherent, like allow ourselves to go home for a minute, like rest and allow ourselves to be nurtured, to nurture someone else, to get really deep into that emotional body and access the emotional truth because the truth is, you can't evolve, you can't change if you're not bringing your emotional experience with you. You have to update your emotional body as much as you update your intellect or you update this or that. True evolution from, again, evolutionary astrology perspective and teaching, evolution happens through the emotional body, which itself is Cancer. So this emphasis happening today, Thursday, the 26th, it's just going to be again, I don't see this as a huge, massive energy, even with this square to Uranus, that absolutely can be a very tangible change. But I think if if it's more of an internal shift, like it's kind of the thing where you say, I'm actually not going to go out. I'm going to stay home, but maybe there's a lot of inertia. Maybe you really thought that plan you were going to go, but then you have to really take a stand for yourself and say, I'm actually going to go home with that moon in Jupiter, and I'm gonna make some space for myself because in the days following, we'll have Mars moving into Pisces, which is a totally different signature. But right now, Mars in Aquarius is just about structuring our own perspective and taking action to really stand for. Mars in many ways is I associate it with Saturn, just because at its peak, Mars is giving off, what am I saying? Mars is taking and perfecting and executing Saturn's orders, right? And that Saturn right now is also ruled by Mars. And so it's like there is a lot of structural clarity in what we are doing. But again, I'm not sure if that's structural clarity that everything outside of us makes sense. It's more of an internal structural clarity that I think will peak on Thursday, potentially a difficult decision we need to make around how we're using our minds, especially how we are using our minds to allow our value, to understand our own value, to understand the intelligence of our own sensory reality as well. So that's really what I'm thinking about this week, this Thursday. Really, just again, in a few days after this, we're going to have that Virgo full moon, lunar eclipse. I'm not going to read that just yet. Maybe I'll make a separate video. But yeah, I mean, it's the day after we'll have the Venus Mercury conjunction. And so there's a lot of like loveliness and potential, like an openness that we have in cultivating our faith at this time, in cultivating our connection to the infinite realms. And I would say especially also because Saturn and Neptune are both out of Pisces, and so we don't have the confusion or the emptiness or the unendingness, rather, that we might have felt before. And so Pisces can kind of exist in its in a more, I don't want to say pure, but in a more accessible state. And we are understanding our drive, our guidance, the directionality of moving, like still wanting to move into Pisces at this time, wanting to, and like following this evolutionary path with the North Node of undoing, right? while we recognize we're building something new now, there's a great unifying still. And I think that will only begin to shift and change once the nodes um, switch signs over the summer. And so, undeniably, though, we are in a very, very different world, a very different phase than we were just a few days ago. Might be a subtle shift, but undeniable nonetheless. Um, Anything else that I want to say? Saturday. There's probably always something I'm gonna miss, but yeah, I feel like that's kind of it from my perspective right now. I will say much more about this lunar eclipse that's happening, and I'll just give a brief preview on that, which is the eclipse is happening with both the sun and the moon in a new phase to the nodal axis, which means we are moving in a new direction with our fate. Whereas even at the last solar eclipse in Aquarius, the sun and the moon were in balsamic phase to the nodal axis. And so we were still completing something when it comes to what our direction was, probably pulling something out of the past still to restart. This is a brand new expression of how we have been cultivating our connection to the Virgo part of our charts, which is our connection to the ritual practice of our devotion, the literal day to day that allows us to show up in a way where we can feel the Pisces faith, right? And so, where you have had to resurrect South Node, resurrect a practice, resurrect a regime, a health and wellness setup, you know? I don't read the South Node as much about letting go as I read it about understanding what's present right here, right now, something you really don't have to work for, and maybe even returning to it. Sometimes it can be a place that we've attempted to abandon as much as it is a place where we have to let go. It can be a place where we have to let go if we're too comfortable and it's too overdone, but I don't think that's always the case for people. I read the South Node simply as the place where the past is present and you don't have to work for it. And so, in this way, we've had Virgo very, very present. Okay. We've been maybe overly relying on the rituals to get us to the feeling of God in Pisces. But I also think that in my experience, I've definitely abandoned some practices that I had to resurrect, reclaim through the South Node in Virgo transit. And so I wonder how that has looked like for you. But I can say with the lunar eclipse, this full moon in Virgo, being in what's called again a new phase to the South Node, we are not going back and resurrecting something anymore. We are seeing, what could I say, the almost completion of this lunar cycle. We're not going to have another full moon, I don't think, or new moon before the nodes switch. I might be wrong. I don't think so. And so I see this as a rather culminative lunar eclipse. And again, I'll probably say more about this in another video, but that is what I have. That's where I'm going to end. So to wrap up nicely, I'll say this is definitely about Thursday. This is definitely about your connection to your openness and your faith, and how your limitless creativity and imagination is allowing you to build a new world. And also about how you are allowing your perception to change, allowing your mind to change. Okay, so all three of these facets kind of weave into each other. Let me know if this was helpful, if it made sense. I do readings. I don't know my availability just yet, so hold on tight. But if you would like to go over these dynamics in your chart, I'm happy to work with you. I will be hosting more in-person events, likely in New York City over the next month. And so if you are interested to attend, I'll be sharing about those more as well. And till the next one, thank you for watching and bye for now.